is a futurist, a technologist from Thomson Reuters. He's back with us today to kind of give us a good primer on all of these topic areas. So I'm really excited to hear from all of this. So Joe, I'm going to toss it over to you to get us started.
Meredith, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm absolutely looking forward to this conversation because I do think that it is one of the most fascinating things that's going on out there that will touch all of our lives, both professionally and personally, certainly personally in the next several years. If you already have not gotten involved in this stuff, believe it or not, it's coming. It is definitely coming for all of us. So I want to sort of level set on a bunch of different components in here. I can certainly go much deeper. So if there's anybody that is familiar with some of this stuff, and you're like, you know what, I get that, but let's go a little bit deeper. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to go down those roads as well. So what I'll do is I'll sort of stay on the surface, but then every once in a while I'll dip down and we'll go a little bit deeper, but we can go far more down the rabbit hole if you'd like. So we'll get there. All right. So what I want to do, because it's important, if you are still new to whole thing around blockchain, I want to level set around that first. And then, so it's a quick recap of blockchain before we do anything else. Then it'll sort of break off into the tangents that are cryptocurrencies and NFTs and all this other stuff, central bank digital currencies that are coming. So get ready for that. So blockchain, let's talk about first the original blockchain, which comes from something called Bitcoin, right? So everyone knows that at this point in time. But just to be a little, to level set. So there's been a lot of people who have claimed to have started Bitcoin. You have this guy, Craig Wright, who has been pushing for this. He has many lawsuits claiming that he is, of course, the originator of Bitcoin. You have this individual based in France who's now in prison. You have another individual who, since the last time I talked about this, he has passed away. So John McAfee, who created McAfee antivirus, sold that and then went down this road. We have an unknown figure. This guy was chased all over Japan by the Japanese media as supposed to be the one that came up with Bitcoin. And he was like, absolutely not. It's not me. Maybe I have the same last name, but it's not me. More than likely, an individual named Nick Szabo actually helped start this. But to the point here, we do not know who started this. Man, woman, grouping of people, whatever it was brilliant. And so let's talk about why this particular piece of technology is so fundamental to the way things are going to shift around the globe going forward. So the history behind this, like I said, we don't know who came up with this, but for perspective, 2008, 2009, we had a small financial crisis, right, that we all are still well aware of, which had ripple effects across the entire globe. So it started off in the United States. Sorry about that for those of you outside of the US. Unfortunately, you saw institutions that have been around for 120 years, 140 years going under overnight that were extraordinarily well established, amazing pedigree. And all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. And people are like, what in the world just happened? Taking a step back from that, those are single points of failure. So think about a big bank like Lehman going under overnight, and people are like, what in the world happened? How can this happen? What can we do to change that paradigm? So what they ended up doing was, and this is where it is, group of men and women, data scientists, who knows, came up with this white paper that you see over on the right-hand side. And what's so fundamental about this is that they said, all right, well, we have that single point of failure. We have banks going under, and the ripple effects of that are catastrophic for many different industries, not just for the banking industry, not just for businesses, but for us, for people around the world. What can we do to change that? And this is where it gets a little weird, but bear with me. And I'm going to ask you to bear with me on a number of different things today. So I know suspension of disbelief is important here in some respects. So what they did was they came up with this white paper, and the white paper basically says, let's have 10,000 computers, nodes, servers, all the same thing, running the same application around the world. They're all interconnected, and they basically have to, in a grouping sense, in a grouping way, confirm that something happens. That I want to send, let's say I have 1 Bitcoin, and I want to send it to Meredith. Pretend I had 1 Bitcoin, wouldn't that be wonderful? And send it to Meredith. Well, I first basically say you can use it on apps like on your phone. There's many applications out there. You can use an app on your of course computer. I basically say, okay, Meredith, please give me your account. And it's basically an elongated string of numbers and letters. And that's her digital wallet. I have a digital wallet as well. So I want to send her 1 Bitcoin. Well, I put 1 Bitcoin in the little box that says, how many do you want to send? And I click send after I put her address in there. It goes out to these, let's say, a grouping of those 10,000 computers. And they actually have to confirm, 1, does Joe have 1 Bitcoin in his wallet? 2, does she have a wallet? Yes, she does. All right, by consensus, let's work on different protocols to make sure that this can be sent to her. What is so special about this underlying technology? So that's Bitcoin. What's so special about this is that the underlying technology is blockchain, which is rudimentary to a lot of the things we're going to go over today. So blockchain. So if anybody ever asks you, and it's newer to you, what blockchain is, all it is a database that's distributed. It has a bunch of mechanisms in there, but I want you to think about it. It's primarily a database that has some specialty mechanisms to make sure that things are safe, things are secure. Nothing is forever secure, but in general, it's very secure. But what's so special about this is that it is a peer-to-peer electronic cash transfer. So in the Bitcoin example, that's what it is. There's no central banking authority. So it goes and bypasses all of the banks. Those huge banks that we're all very aware of, you can bypass those banks. Relies on cryptography. So the same cryptography that you're using with the banks or any of the other apps that you have that need cryptography that's been around since 1982, that's baked into it as well. So the nodes have to agree to these types of things. It is it's a fascinating piece of technology, or groupings of technology that has basically manifested itself into the blockchain, right? So the first example is Bitcoin. We're going to move past that in just a second, but I wanted to give you a little bit of history around that. Now, this is just, you can come back to this and take a gander at it at your leisure. This is what I described with respect to the transaction that Meredith and I just finished. So me sending money to her, I need to know her specific address. It then gets broadcast to that network in the number 3 that you see over there. And then the network says, yep, this is just something that we believe is part of this. Then it adds it to that ledger. So sometimes you hear blockchain, ledger, distributed ledger. The way that I like to think about it, quite honestly, is an Excel spreadsheet that has every single transaction that's ever existed going back to the first. And then it saves it to that database, to that Excel spreadsheet. So you can go back and you can look at every single transaction. You can prove every single one of those transactions. It's really cool stuff. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. And I will love to take questions, but I probably will do so at the end, hoping that there will be time. And of course, I'll have some information up there if you want to reach out and talk about this in more depth. So, Eleanor, I apologize. I'm just going to do a quick little tangent about the birth of some of the cryptocurrencies. Because we're going to talk about token sales. So briefly, we're going to talk about this because it leads into why we're even talking about this, why fintech is enveloped in this now, why government agencies are looking at this very closely around the world. So Bitcoin came about, let's say 2008, 2009, right? And then there was this pause and there were other programs or blockchains that were developed. Watch this graph. This is moving, right? So you see Europe on the bottom left. You see the timeline on the x-axis. In the upper left-hand corner, you see how many different projects were developed. So these are people, groups of people that came up with their own blockchains. And then they did these token sales, which we'll talk about in a second. So they raised tons of money very quickly in these token sales to help fund themselves. Some of them were legitimate, some of them were not. We saw this huge ballooning, and you'll see how fast this goes. When we talk about exponential growth, this is exponential growth. You'll see how these little balls start to increase, and they're all separate projects. And this is where it kicked off. So 2017 is really where we saw all of this just grow enormously. And you could see that you got up to, $23 billion. And the biggest of those are like some EOS and other projects, whatever the case is. And this was a global phenomenon. So people made tons of money and then they all lost it very quickly. And then we're sort of back up to where this is now, but in a different iteration of that. So what is the net of this? Well, the net of this is something that I think is very important. Ethereum is the second biggest blockchain. Bitcoin being the first, the original, but Ethereum is the second biggest. The difference between these two we'll talk about in a second, but Ethereum is the almost 2.0 version. So if you think about Bitcoin, primarily right now, it's an exchange of money. It's trying to be currency. It's trying to work with or supplant maybe the dollar, the yen, the euro, whatever the case is, it's trying to be like that. Ethereum is different in the sense that it's a database that's supposed to potentially be a platform that allows for any business to be built on top of it in a secure way, in a generally autonomous way, such that what it does is it creates this world where you can build your applications on top of it, and you're using Ethereum as the place to save information or to execute code on top of. So Ethereum is the second biggest one. I'll talk about the various apps, really called dApps, in a second. But if there's something to take notice of, it's this one. And there's several others that are all competing for this, which is a healthy ecosystem because there's many that are now trying to take the reins of Ethereum. But just so you know, it's there. So why did this all take off? You saw that graph, that little video that I just showed. What was the rationale? What did people go through? I'll go through this very quickly, but just to give you an idea of what led us to where we are today. Again, this is a boom and bust, but still is out there as something that potentially companies can do if they so desire. So the ICO, which is the initial coin offering, right? It sounds like the IPO, and I think for those of you in the fintech space, you know this very well. But the ICO's initial coin offering was a way to raise money. And essentially, it would be any one of us could do this. So literally, any one of you could do this. You would start a website, and on that website, you would write a white paper. The white paper typically is maybe 5 to 10 pages long. It describes what your business is going to do. And so that everyone understands this, everyone understands what you want to do. So you build your website, you write the white paper, the purpose, the timeline, and then this is the part where it gets a little bit different than what we're all used to. So with the IPO process, the old dog and pony show, you go out to California, you go to Europe, you go to New York, and you raise money, you hit all the big wigs that have all this money to give you. They get shares for those types of things. This is a bit of a disruptor in the sense that now what you would do is you would have your website, you write the white paper, and then from January 1st through January 15th, anybody who wants to can come to that website and say, all right, I have Bitcoin, I have Ethereum, Ether, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1 Bitcoin, and you're going to give me 10,000 Joe coins. So I'm the company. You come to my website, and you, through your wallet, send me 1 Bitcoin. And in return, I'm going to give you 10,000 Joe coins. And you're like, what in the world? So Joe's giving me 10,000 of his coins. What's going to happen with that? Well, it goes in your digital wallet. All of this is stored on the blockchain. So it should be safe. It should be secured. It's provable. In this smart contract, we'll talk about that in a second. In the smart contract, it's provable that you now have 10,000 Joe coins in your wallet. So SEC and all this stuff is now much more dialed into this. So back then it was called donating to try to skirt some of those issues. So transactions, of course, are stored on the blockchain. It's recorded. Users are given tokens or coins in exchange for the donation. Those coins are then into your wallet. And then lastly, this is where it got sort of bonkers. So now you have these 10,000 coins in your wallet. You're like, all right, so you sit on those things for maybe a month, maybe 2 months, whatever the case is. Then you were able to port these over to exchanges. Now there's roughly, I guess, 175 different exchanges around the world. And you would take those tokens over, you would import them into your account. And that's where maybe they were worth 10 cents each US. And then all of a sudden they would take off to $1 or maybe $10 or maybe more. And so you could see people made huge sums of money, but it also came down very quickly. So that's how in 2017, when people first started playing around with this and seeing it, it took off. For better or for worse, I've been around in this business, I guess, since 2011 with Bitcoin and all that stuff. So I've seen that a lot of iterations in this, and it's been fascinating to watch. So to sort of highlight what I just mentioned a little while ago, what I want you to think about is at the top level, there are roughly 2 different categories. There are subsets to this, but there are 2 different categories. One is currency. So Bitcoin, think of Bitcoin currently as a currency, like the dollar, the euro, and then Ethereum. So Ethereum ERC20 token allows you to do things. So you can save whatever you want. Maybe it's a brief. You want to save a brief to the blockchain, which we'll see in not too distant future. You can do it now, but if you want to save it to there, you need a little bit of this token. So you have to buy the token and take a tiny little subset of that token to pay for that to be saved on the blockchain. So if you want to save it in a place that it's safe and secure, you have access to it, maybe your client has access to it, you can do so by paying a little bit of this Ether token to save it to that blockchain. We can go down many layers to that, but an important component to this is the smart contract. I came up with this example, I dare say 5 years ago, and bear with me, because I think everyone can relate to this, especially, of course, the attorneys or the lawyers in the UK. Maybe you have a friend, family member is like, hey, can you do me a will, write me up a will? And you're like, I'm an IP, I don't do will, trust and estates, and you're like, fine, I'll do it. And so you jump into Word and you grab paragraphs. You have obviously some template that you're using. You further craft that document. It's written. You turn it into a PDF document, maybe using Drafting Assistant, whatever the case is. You turn it into a PDF. You're good to go. This is where things are going to shift, and they are already shifting. So you take that document, and it's now codified. So I'm not expecting you to go through the code and understand the code unless you're more on the techie side, but I'll walk you through it. And so the idea behind this will is this. Let me describe the will for you. Upon the parent's death, they have 2 kids, kid A, kid B. Haven't named them yet. The parents stipulate that they want both kids to be married upon their death to split the estate 50-50. If one kid's married and one's not, then the kid that's married gets 100% of the estate, and the kid that's not gets zilch. Yeah, great, right? Whatever. The parents really wanted them to be married, I don't know, for whatever reason. So that's what the will says. Now it's codified. And so those are the parameters. You heard the parameters I sort of just walked through. And so a computer every single day reaches out to a trusted source that we call an oracle. In the blockchain world, it's called an oracle. Oracle's a trusted source. It could be Thomson Reuters. It could be the federal government. It could be any organization that's considered trusted. So every day it reaches out and says, are the parents alive? Most of the time it says no, 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 no. And then whatever, 10 years later, it says, yes, sadly, both have passed. Heartless, it says, what's my next task? The next task is to determine whether or not both kids are married. So again, a computer to computer call comes back and says, one kid is married and one is not. Stinks for the kid that didn't get married. And it goes on to the next thing. It says, okay, now the kid that's married gets 100% of the estate. For the sake of argument here, it's all liquid assets and it's automatically transferred to that kid. Now, I know the lawyers and attorneys here can punch a ton of holes in this, which means you're going to have even more security going forward because litigation is going to take off, especially in the beginning of this. But what we're talking about is a time where this entire right-hand side is all automated. So it doesn't necessarily mean that an attorney or lawyer is necessary for this application to take place. It will automate a lot of this, stored on the blockchain. It's executed in such that it will help make these things a little more fluid, a little bit easier in terms of workflow. That's a smart contract. Now, smart contracts are fundamental to what I'm about to describe and go through going forward. So there are thousands and thousands of cryptocurrencies right now. So when I took this screenshot probably 3 or 4 months ago, there were, and you could see in the very top corner, I apologize for the smallness of that, there were 10,238 cryptocurrencies. We are a roughly $2 trillion market cap. If you're to try to compare it to like whatever we see in our normal markets. Bitcoin, so this is 1 to 10. So Bitcoin, the top one is still the biggest. Ethereum is the second biggest. There are other projects. Some of them are trying to be cryptocurrency. Some are trying to be like the Ethereums of the world. So this world's computer to build out all these different projects on that we'll talk about in just a second. And then there are stable coins. So if you haven't heard of stable coins are a basket of different types of currencies or whatever you want to create a stable version of. And that allows for people to say, okay, I want to get out of X currency and move into this, and it should stay at $1 or €1 at all times. That's the goal of that. A lot of different directions we can go in that, but let's hold off. Now, for those of you who have not gone down this road, I'm going to do a quick side note in how to invest, just so you know if you want to go down the road of how to do this. So if you were to purchase cryptocurrency, there are many exchanges, many that are considered fairly trusted. Coinbase in the United States, Kraken's also based in the United States, Binance based in, depending where you ask, depending on the day, probably in Singapore, maybe in Cyprus, wherever they say they are very much favoring the Asian markets, but certainly there's presence in London as well as the United States. So these are places that basically are almost like your Fidelity accounts or your Schwab accounts or your brokerage accounts, where you would port over US dollars. And once you have your money there, you can then buy cryptocurrency. So you can buy your Bitcoin, you can buy your Ethereum, you can buy your Litecoin or whatever you want to buy. They'll have those things and you basically exchange or you trade them just like you would a stock, knowing that stocks are highly regulated and these are not fully regulated as of yet. These are centralized exchanges. They have taken off. They are very popular. They are the primary intro for most people. Once you feel very comfortable about these things, buying things, selling things, the next iteration of this are decentralized exchanges. This is where it gets a little wacky in some respects, and I like the idea of what decentralized exchanges are doing, but it's sort of cuspy. It's on the edge, and regulation is not fully there yet. So it's, again, one of those areas that is a little bit different. So let me describe what a decentralized exchange is. If any of you have ever worked in torrents, remember the days when you could download music from multiple locations, and of course it's illegal. Let's say it's music. Let's say it's free music, so it makes it more legitimate. You are essentially connecting to a network, and then that MP3 sits out there somewhere in the ether. And when you connect, say, I want to download this song that Joe wrote, whatever, 2 years ago. It's free, so we're bypassing all that. You're essentially downloading that file from maybe 100 different locations at once. So it could sit on 100 different computers around the world. So it might be someone in London, it might be someone in Singapore or I don't know, South Africa. It's on those computers, but you're downloading it at the same time. So you're connecting to this weird world of computers that are interconnected, and then you're able to download something. The same sense you're actually able to do with decentralized exchanges. You're connecting to a network that sits out there in the ether. You're connecting to people, and then you're able to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency in the same way. So it's a decentralized exchange, also known as a DEX. There are multiples out there. Some of the naming conventions are really bizarre in this world, as you might expect, tech people going down this road. So SushiSwap is one. Uniswap is another. 0x protocol is another one that you can actually go through as well. So what I want to illustrate here is that while most people in the world probably go through a centralized framework, like a Coinbase or Kraken, there are decentralized frameworks out there that in many respects are, if you're a purist, make more sense. If you are very sensitive and secure to your own property and your rights to your property, you'll also go down this road. There's certainly use cases for both that I see, that I understand and respect. So just something to be aware of. So that's the decentralized exchange versus the centralized exchange. Now, if you end up going down the road of the decentralized exchanges, which is becoming very, very popular. I think there's at least 10 million that have downloaded this particular app that you see right now, which helps enable yourself. I think it enables you to actually take ownership of your assets without having sort of a middle person in there. One of them is MetaMask. There's many different what we call digital wallets, personal wallets that are out there, but MetaMask is probably the most popular. It's a plugin, it's an app for your phone, whatever the case is. Ultimately, what you do is you download this application, you set up your account, you have ownership of, and I took out the slide because it maybe for time, you have ownership of both your private key and your public key. To be very brief on this, the public key is a key or a number, letters, that basically identifies who you are. And so anytime that you want to receive money, or as we'll talk about NFTs, you basically put that out there and say, hey, this is my address. It's like your home address. This is the place that I want you to send cryptocurrency, or I want you to send my NFT to. Awesome. That's the address that people will send it to. On the flip side of that, there's something called the public key. And this is going back to encryption for decades, right? The private key is essentially your password. You never, ever, 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 ever want to share that with anyone. That is the key that you ultimately have responsibility for, you control. If that were ever to get out, then anything that's in that wallet is whoever can basically be owned by that person. The exchanges, so those public exchanges like the Coinbases of the world, you will never see, or you should never see that private key. They've made it so that they have ownership of that. So basically they have custody of that, which for many people, that's awesome because they don't even have to worry about it. Because if you lose that that private key or someone gets it, you basically are in jeopardy of losing everything there. So, right, so there's the pluses and minuses there. You control it, you're good. You feel more confident in that no one can sort of hack you for the most part. Awesome. So I won't go through these things, but the idea is that with these wallets, you are in control. You have the ability to buy, sell, trade, to stake. We'll talk about staking in the not too distant future here, cryptocurrency. But ultimately with these personal wallets, you'll be able to do a lot more. And again, these personal wallets are going to be things that we all have to deal with because the federal government's going to be talking about these in the not too distant future with our own ways of doing these types of things. So let's get into DeFi. So decentralized finance, for those of you that are in this space, you know this cold. I'm happy to go down much, much deeper if you'd like. But just so as a recap, decentralized finance in a nutshell is this idea that you could take virtually everything that we know today that are on the exchanges or the derivatives or interest, loans, stocks, bonds, everything, and port that over to a decentralized model. Now, I mean this with ultimate and utmost respect. There's a lot of tug and pull here. So clearly the banks do not want this to necessarily happen. But on the same tone, there are switching tones maybe, there are groups of people that are building this out. There are significant projects that are working right now that basically replicate everything you can possibly imagine in that typical financial world right now in this decentralized world. And I've played around with it. I've worked in some of this space. They are working very well. There's always some potential jeopardy there. There's a lot of risk there still because we're talking about basically systems that are based on code that are executing based on parameters. So there will be crazy, weird things that happen, be it breaches or whatever the case is. But for now, a lot of these things are working. So think about enabling all functions on these various platforms like Ethereum or Compound, stable coins, all of those types of things are transitioning right now. Now, for those of you in the fintech space, either you're working maybe with clients and are deep diving in this, or maybe you're working on the regulatory side and you're like, all right, there's a lot of openness right now. We need to really either clamp this down or get some better understanding. Hopefully it's a better understanding of how this can help enable people better access, better clarity, better transparency. All that stuff is there natively with this, which is why some people are really pushing it. Fundamentally, we're talking about new financial systems, disruptors to banks, access for everyone. That's sort of a kind of a cool thing. I've written a lot about this type of different components inside this. And one part of this that we don't think about too often, but there's 10% of the United States, 10% of the United States are unbanked, either because they don't trust the banks or because they don't have access to banks. This will allow for people to take advantage of this because they don't necessarily need a bank. All they need is a phone. It could be an old school flip phone. I talk a lot about this internationally, even in Africa or South America. And for them, it's even more important, even more transformative. So we're going to see some things down there take off probably a little more than, or a little more quickly, maybe than here or Europe. maybe even Asia, but yes, all right. So why, and I've seen this since the beginning, why am I so passionate about this in terms of how significant this could potentially be for people? These are DeFi protocols. So these are organizations, almost DAOs that we'll talk about in a second, decentralized autonomous organizations. They're basically websites that you can go to that allow you to take your cryptocurrency and to stake it at the bare minimum to swap tokens. So maybe you want to day trade. It's almost like buy and selling stocks at its most core. But then there's many elements that sit on top of that. What if you want interest minimum of 7%? Well, you can do that right now. What if you want interest 100%? You can do that now. It's gonna be more risky, but you take, let's say you bought 100 Ethereum, which now sit at $3,000 each. So you have whatever, $300,000 worth of Ethereum. You're like, all right, it's sitting in my wallet. It's doing nothing. The cost benefit analysis on that, or whatever it is, yeah, you're losing money because it's not earning anything. So what you can do is you can stake that. You can take it to one of these sites like Aave or Compound, and you can stake it. What does that mean? It means that you take those tokens, you put it into a smart contract. It says Joe has those 100 tokens in this particular location, and it's saved on the blockchain. Everyone knows that that's his, and we're going to give him 7% interest. We're going to give them 15% interest on that in Ether, which you could eventually sell or transfer into dollars or euros or whatever you want to say. British pounds, got to bring those in there. So you get the idea. And then people can take out loans on that. They can take out flash loans on that. There's all these things that you all know better than I do when it comes to the iterations within the financial world based on that. So this was taken probably 2 or 3 months ago. Aave had $7 billion. So just everyday average people buying cryptocurrency and then staking money in there. They put 7 billion. About 2 months later, it jumped up to 22 billion. So the growth is exponential there. And Sushi and Maker, whatever, all these types of things, Sushi Swap, all of those are similar in concept, same types of exchanges. Now, layer 2. So think about Ethereum. We're just going to use Ethereum as an example as a primary place where you can store information and executable code. It's not the fastest. So they're coming out with a new version of it. So ETH2. So we're calling that layer 2, which means that there's companies that are respecting that layer 1, so the original blockchain, and they're building out companies on top of it. There are hundreds, if not thousands of companies that are being built to do things. I know it's small, but you can see there's lending and borrowing companies. There's exchanges, there's NFTs, which we'll talk about in a second. There's portfolio tracking, there's wallets, there's derivatives, there's infrastructure. For those of you that are not so young that you missed out on the .com era, this is, and that was my era. I was like, oh yeah, this is so cool. I was young and I was like, this is the most amazing thing in the world. It's like that again, but this has probably even more of an impact. And some people think that it's basically, technically it's we're thinking about the internet like 3.0. So it's a significant portion of the internet going forward. Quick thing about the environmental impact. Bitcoin still relies on tons of computational processing power. So computers working really, really hard, spending a lot of electricity, unfortunately. But those individuals that are doing this mining are doing it in areas where hopefully they're leveraging a lot of more environmentally sound things, would be it solar or wind farms. And so they're going to that and they're using that more than almost any other industry. Layer 2 for Ethereum is using a staking, so proof of stake, which means that you stake tokens. It's in a smart contract. And if your machine messes up, then you lose that. You lose those tokens. So it's moving away from using tons of electricity to you staking tokens to make sure that the machine is not going to cheat somebody or cheat the system in general. Again, something we can go much deeper on at another point in time. Okay, so what we know today, more and more people are having these crypto wallets you see on the left-hand side. They may have many different types of cryptocurrency. There is, for now, intermediaries that basically allow you to go to Whole Foods or allow you to go to Starbucks and use that. If you really wanted to, you could do that. In the not too distant future, I think people will, this is where it gets a little weird for those of you and me included, traditional mindsets. maybe you don't need dollars. Maybe you don't need euros. Maybe you don't need British pounds anymore. You have Ethereum, you have Bitcoin, and everything you do, you transact in is in that. When things become more stable, people will do that, or they'll move things to stable coins, which will allow them to do that, which is creating much, much buzz with our government agencies, which is totally understandable, to say, shoot, this could disrupt our current paradigm with the dollar or the pound or whatever the case is. And believe it or not, these are things that I've always been thinking about, but I have had to hold back until probably the last year or two to talk about, because it was out there. Now it's not. Now it's something that's very real. So what we have are private currencies. So let's say Ethereum is semi-private. I mean, it's technically a nonprofit. Bitcoin is open source project. Any one of us can be involved in it. But you're getting things like Facebook, who will come out with their own currency. Initially, it was called Libra. And I've talked about how these machines, so basically any one of us can plug into the Bitcoin network. You have a computer, literally, I mean, not as much anymore because computers need much more processing power. But imagine 10 years ago, you were able to plug in your laptop that you're working on, add the software, plug it into the internet or whatever, Wi-Fi, and you act as a node. You're a computer that's helping confirm transactions. And when you help confirm those transactions, you get paid out on a little bit of Bitcoin. Same idea with Libra, which is now termed something else. We'll talk about it in a second, called Diem. All of the nodes, so this was like Visa saying, you know what, we could be disrupted in this, or Lyft, or whatever the case is. We're going to participate in this. We're going to work with Facebook, and we're going to come up with our own currency. Facebook could turn this on overnight and push this out to everyone. So it might be in your WhatsApp, it might be on your native Facebook app, your Messenger app, whatever. Immediately, everyone, 2.5 billion people could have their native currency. And once you have that, maybe they give you some initially, or you then convert from dollars or whatever to that particular Libra or Diem. How much sense does it make to use in dollars? And this is going to sound weird for some people, but I'm selling a house that I have here outside of DC. And I told the brokers, I'm ready to take cryptocurrency because I've seen other groups doing this. And I'd gladly take cryptocurrency almost as equal as dollars, because there's so much value in that going forward. So it's now called Diem, just so you know. I'm just putting this up as the branding. Because they had lots of pushback on this, and Facebook's going to have trouble anyways, because whether you love them or hate them, they're going to have trouble anyways because of all the privacy issues that they have. So quick item. I'm going to be mindful of time here. Quick item about privacy coins. A lot of people think Bitcoin is anonymous. It is not. It is pseudo-anonymous, which means once Meredith tells me, this is my address, Joe, and she emailed it to me, I know that address that she sent is tied to Meredith. And so going forward, I know, and I can actually look at her wallet and see how much money she has. Like, holy smokes. No, just kidding. So I could actually see that. Pluses and minuses with that. On one side of this, there are some coins out there that are truly, at this point in time, have algorithms baked inside or methodologies baked inside that are completely and totally anonymous, meaning that you can trade, you can store money in there and no one knows who it is, who owns it. There are some really good use cases for this. There are also some not good use cases, and you can imagine both. So money laundering, not a good thing. There's no way to really track those people. But on the other side, maybe you are in Iran and you do not want the government tracking you because you want a pamphlet on how to promote democracy. And to get that pamphlet, I don't know why they'd be doing this, someone's asking for some money for it on the dark web. So you go to the dark web because you don't want the government knowing that you are trying to promote democracy inside of the country. And so they use this to transact. So there are clearly good use cases for this. But on the other side, there are some challenges. So as a society around the world, we're going to be challenged with this going forward. Last thing I will say is that there are companies that track lots of cryptocurrency across the board, and they see it as under 1% of all transactions being for bad, for evil, bad guys, all that stuff. So that's hopefully a good sign. Cash is still there. People are still using cash, and there's really not much of a way to track that. All right, so NFTs. Now, NFTs have been around for 4 years. And I would go to conferences in 2017, 2018 and talk with people about this stuff. And I was like, this is kind of a joke. I don't know, this is ridiculous. I see some value in this, but I don't see really where this could go. Then a few years ago, I was like, holy smokes, now it clicked. So it took me a long time for it to click. And this part that I'm about to go through, I'm asking for you, if you haven't gone down that hole yet, the rabbit hole yet, maybe it'll take some time. So just bear with me for a second. And I know you might be like, all right, Joe, whatever. But once you get there, and I think most of us will probably get there because it's really truly taking off where it once was a fad. And certainly it's at that higher end of where we saw the ICOs go. And it's going to see this up and down. This in legal is first use case that you're really going to start to see people take notice in terms of digital contracts, ownership of assets, how that's transferred, and baked into transactional practice, and eventually into litigation as those contracts go awry. All right, so here we go. So a lot of words are going to be up on the screen, and I apologize, but just in case you want to come back to this, it'll be there. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. It's a unit of storage on a blockchain, on a digital ledger. And what it means is that whatever you're representing, in the beginning, it's art. It has a unique identifier. So that picture has a hash or a really long string of numbers and letters that are stored on that Ethereum blockchain or other blockchain. And it says, this is true. This person owns it. It was created on this date. It was sold on this date. And there could be a whole bunch of other parameters inside. But it's saying that this is digital proof of that particular asset. I can't wait for the questions. Hopefully we have time. All right, NFTs can be used to represent, of course, items like photos or videos or audio and any other type of digital file. And we can start to think about how contracts will fit into that. But here we go. So and this is access to any copy of the original file. All of these things are stored on the blockchain and shows that proof of ownership, which is really, really important to this, to prevent copyright and all sorts of things. This is where it gets fun. If you've heard about this before, I apologize. But for those of you who have not, so the first NFTs to ever exist is a project that started in 2017 called CryptoPunks. CryptoPunks were created by some organization, two guys they created a company called Larva Labs, and they created 10,000 unique pieces of art. They have humans, both men and women. They have apes, aliens, and among those, there's rarity. So rarities in features or what they look like or what they're wearing, all of those things, which we'll talk about in a second, creates scarcity. Those scarcity pieces are stored on the blockchain. They're represented in a picture, and people can take ownership of that. So that digital wallet I just showed you back there, called the MetaMask, whatever wallet, 2017, you could basically say, I want that picture. You click go, you paid a little bit of what we call gas, basically that token. So you're paying the token to say, I want that picture. And the machine behind the scene works it and says, okay, now you have it. Here's your digital representation of that picture. Now it's yours. And you're like, cool, now I got this. I paid maybe back then $1 for it. This one sold for $100,000 about 6 months ago. It's currently worth $1 million. Some of these have sold upwards of $8 million. Christie's is currently doing batches of these for $16, $18 million. Because this is the original, people see this as the holy grail of those particular pieces. Now, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of new projects, new pieces of art that are out there that we'll go through very quickly. I'm not going to go through 100,000 of them, but I'll go through them kind of quickly. But what I want you to do is start thinking about, okay, all right, if people are able to represent a picture, a piece of art as this NFT, what else can you do? This is where it gets even more challenging, maybe, at least for me initially it was. Jack Dorsey, of course, the CEO of Twitter, basically said, you know what, I'm going to make an NFT out of my first tweet. So I'm going to store this on the blockchain, digital representation of my first tweet, I'm going to authenticate it, this is it. He was able to sell his first tweet for it's $2.7 million to a charity, or for charity. Sold to someone. You might be like, Joe, that makes no sense. I can go to his Twitter feed and I can go to his first tweet and I can capture that myself. Now I have it. You do. It's just like, do you have the Mona Lisa? No, the Mona Lisa, of course, sits at the Louvre, right? Yeah, the Louvre in Paris. You have a picture of the Mona Lisa on your wall. It's not the same. That's the difference. I know, again, I've talked with people recently, so it keeps echoing in my ear when people are like, no, that's ridiculous. Believe me, this is the direction, for better or worse, that we're going. And then one other artist basically took 5,000 pieces of art, sold it for $70 million not long ago for what amounts to Ethereum. Not expecting to read all that, but the idea is that the movement is afoot. So where are we going with this? CryptoPunks, as I mentioned earlier, those are some other pictures that are out there. They are all unique. People take ownership of these things. There it is, 9 aliens, 24 apes, 88 zombies, 3,840 female, and then whatever, 6,039 male. So the part that I wanted to explain with this is that with art, with all of these things, you can bake into that smart contract parameters. And in this instance, the parameters are certain features. And it'll tell you that, let's say there's only 44 of these beings that have these beanies. There's 7 available for sale right now. The average sale is 265 ETH. So multiply that by 3,000. So this guy right here is worth $2.4 million if you wanted to buy him right now. Let's get beyond the dollars, but that's the idea. So behind the whole scenes is that there are attributes, there are features, create scarcity, it's stored on the blockchain, it creates that digital contract between 2 humans via this machine. That's the direction of a lot of these things that will go. So going forward, and we're seeing this right now, there are many artists that are porting over their worlds to this, and they're creating set numbers of pieces of art that are unique, that have their own identifiers on the blockchain. You can take ownership of that. You can put it into your MetaMask wallet. There are blue chips. I guess I would consider this a blue chip. This is another blue chip. I know you might be like, I'm not into modern art. Maybe you are. I am not typically a modern artist type person, but this is something that seems to be popular for people. So where are we going with all of this? Well, this is where we're going with it. So the first iteration, people are buying these things, and then hopefully I can play this. We're moving into a world where we, for the last 13 years, have been looking down at our iPhones, our Android devices, 18 months away. We're moving to the metaverse, if not sooner, a little bit later, where you take ownership of these assets. They're going to be in your digital space. People will be able to see, interact with the art at a bare minimum, and then wait till this is where the real suspension of disbelief will take off. So you can actually see that this particular picture, whatever it is 3-dimensional. So you're actually able to interact with that. Those will be avatars in the next space that we're moving in. Which, and again, deep breath for those of you who are already rolling your eyes. This is coming, just like email, when I, or just like, text messages. Like, in the beginning, when I was a little kid, text messages, and I would text someone and they're like, what is this showing up on my flip phone? What in the world are you doing, Joe? Or 2011, like, hey, there's these Bitcoins that I can send you. Like, Joe, what are you doing? And I'm not saying I know anything, but I'm just saying these are the things that are coming in my firm belief. The metaverse is next. So the metaverse, the next 18 months, is going to be us moving, and we're still going to be using our iPhones, Android devices for the foreseeable future. But where this stuff changes is that Apple is going to be coming out with something called Apple Glass. I don't know why they chose that name, but Apple Glass, Google Glass, right? Oculus, Magic Leap, virtual reality headsets / mixed reality, which means you see everything around you, you'll interact with each other, your colleagues, your clients, using these devices. In the next 18 months, they're going to be coming out with this. So it's going to be that next iteration where we're all like 13 years ago, like, oh my goodness, I have this piece of glass that I'm able to touch on. This is that next leap. It's coming. So that's why all of this art is taking off, because people are going to be saying, this is the first part that I'm able to store on my wall in the metaverse. Here we go. So I don't know if any of you, I'm sure many of you back in undergrad or maybe high school or maybe even probably not in law school, maybe taken a course or two on economics. One of the things that we all know is scarcity. There's a certain amount of land that will ever exist in the world, although Dubai and maybe China will say otherwise as they're building out additional pieces of land. The decentralized world is that they're creating platforms where you have land. Right now, you can go down there and you can buy a plot of land. X plot of land is close to the medical facility. This one's close to where all the law firms are, or this is where the playlands are, all that sorts of things. So people can now buy plots of land using Ethereum, using their whatever cryptocurrency, so that when people start donning these things, you can go down there and you can interact with things. As you can see, this is like a little block, exclusive area, really close to the main plaza. Suspension of disbelief, I know. So all of this is coming to a head. Pop culture is getting into this. Business is getting into this. Law firms, I'm sure some of you have probably worked in this already. In the CryptoPunk, which I'm using as the example of all the NFT art, Visa bought a CryptoPunk about 4 weeks ago. They spent $150,000 on it. So they, a fully established organization that deals with currencies of all type, got some Ethereum, went out and bought a CryptoPunk. That is somewhat telling. So, whole point here, everything that you can see physically or now, potentially electronically, can be tokenized. So properties, deeds to properties, of course, dollars, euros, all of that stuff's being transformed and repurposed in some ways. Stocks, there are synthetic stocks. So mirrors of Google or Apple right now. This is a crazy space, going to be lots of issues for various governments, including ours, and they're already stamping down on it. All of that is tokenized. One very important thing that I want to make sure everyone's aware of, DAOs, I mentioned it earlier, distributed autonomous organizations. These are entities, businesses, all based on code. This is going to be the way going forward. They're autonomous once built. The example that I like to give, and I don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to sort of basically say, the way that you interact with a vending machine, not that we really do any of that much anymore, is you go to the vending machine, you want that Snickers bar, you say, put your dollar in or whatever it is, actually put up your phone against it, you put in B2, and then it comes out. So it takes your money. These are the contracts they're having behind the scene. Gives you the snack, uses money to reorder that because it knows that there's only X number of candy bars sitting there in that row. It's also cleaning it for services. All of that stuff is baked into the code that sits inside of that. A distributed autonomous organization is such an amazing potential for disrupting, such that you will have business that are already happening right now. So that Aave, that site that you can go to where you can buy and sell tokens, is a DAO. There's going to be DAOs that come out that supplant, take away Lyft and Uber, because you can do that all in code, and you could have 100 people run the organization, whereas they may have 10,000. On the employment side, it's going to be kind of interesting going forward, but it's going to birth tons of new companies that are fewer people, but way more dynamic. And there's a whole bunch that I could go on, but I will not talk about that. I just wanted to introduce that as an idea if you haven't seen it already. So future contracts, digital assets, be it deeds to properties, be it, of course, these pieces of art, be it anything you can think of that you can verify, that tokenization plus the code, that smart contract, will create these new contracts. Tons of litigation coming. Very quickly, digital dollar. What started in 2009 with Bitcoin is real. China is the first to have a digital currency that they have a proof of concept that really is out there. We were very close in one of the Fed stimulus bills back in May of last year to having a US digital dollar. There are now 83 countries around the world that are working on a digital currency for themselves, which they think will compete against these, but they are very different. Again, another tangent we can go down the road of. Final thoughts. Tokenization leads, and these are my thoughts, tokenization leads to codification rules. Legal contracts are coming. DAOs will become a norm. NFTs are the on-ramp, so the beginning stages of this. But you can see that a deed to a property will be an NFT. They don't need to have a picture necessarily or a unique whatever, but there'll be something that represents that and it has a unique identifier, which you can then put into a digital contract. The metaverse is coming. DeFi will lead in this space, and there is tremendous opportunity in fintech and legal tech and the law, of course. The challenges, you know the challenges, GDPR and CCPA, and then Virginia has something going on. Blockchains are immutable. There are groups working on around that. Regulation, so obvious. I didn't do global on that. I do have another slide on that, but you all probably know that far better than I do. But that's the essence of what we're talking about. I'm flying through this because this is something that's less important, but suffice to say, almost every single business is going to either have to adapt if they're sort of an intermediary, or they're going to be disrupted. And I know that's trite to say, but it's happening. I'm seeing it. It's fascinating to watch, but just something to be aware of as these DAOs start to take off. Shoot, I wanted to have more time. I apologize for that.